Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So today I got a short list of 7 1980s CGC 9.8 comic books that you can buy and hold forever. And always really tough on these videos to narrow it down, so I got a full list of honorable mentions as well. So altogether there's 18 investment grade 1980s CGC 9.8 comic books to recommend in the video here. And you know what, the 1980s is probably my favorite era to buy CGC 9.8 comic books. Yeah, it's just, for me, it's kind of like the last bastion of affordability in 9.8 collecting. Because, you know, once you get into the 70s, just things get so rare and so expensive. So from that perspective, it really fits in. And, you know, for me, like, it's either the 80s or the 90s are my favorite era to collect in. Because in the 90s, mid-90s, I was about 10 years old, just falling in love with Spawn and Mcfarland and all that. Looking back on all these 80s books, though, and really wanting them. So, yeah, I think, you know, it makes sense to kind of focus on the 1980s era here, especially if you're a 9.8 collector coming at it from an investment perspective. Okay, so 18 CGC 9.8s from the 1980s to get into here. First one on the list is an Amazing Spider-Man number 252 in the CGC 9.8. Yeah, such a classic book, such a collectible Spider-Man book in the CGC 9.8. It's the first appearance of the black costume tied with Marvel Team Up 141. But I've sort of liked this one over that one, thinking this one's a little bit more collectible. You get the Amazing Fantasy 15 cover homage of the first Spider-Man cover ever. I think that just makes this one really collectible, and, you know, you throw in the first black costume in there, so all the Venom and Symbiote fans are really going to like this one too. This is always going to be a classic cover. So yeah, a lot of reasons to like Amazing Spider-Man 252 in the CGC 9.8. Even better, it looks really good on the Census, so in the 9.8 specifically, it's even better. So there's a 1,299 CGC 9.8s in the blue label out there. So, like, all these Spider-Man books are really popular, so there's almost always 1,000 of them. But the thing you want to focus on a little bit more, the CGC 9.8 percentage of all graded copies, 11.3% of them are CGC 9.8s. So the lower the better with these 9.8 ratios, and right around 11.3% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8. That's nice and rare for this book, 1984 book. It's kind of a mid-80s book. Nice rarity, getting into the single digits there almost at 11.3%. So yeah, lots of reasons to recommend this one. Interesting, there's a completed listing that just came across here on eBay. It was an auction, and it ended right at $1,000. Yeah, right at $1,000. So another one joins the $1,000 club, I guess. It was in a newsstand too. I brought out my newsstand. So one just like this. So if you have a look just in the past couple weeks here at some of the completed listings on eBay as well, one sold for $890, another one sold for $905. Those were both newsstands too. It seemed like, yeah, the last like 5 or 6 completed listings on eBay were newsstands. So all the recent completed ones have been newsstands. So maybe if a direct comes along, maybe you get it closer to 800, maybe 750 area. You know, this one, with it being a symbiote book, it's kind of heating up with Venom 2 coming out next year. So, you know, such a book to recommend, but do you want to get out there and pay $1,000 for one in the 9.8 white pages right now? I don't think so. I think you're patient on this one, maybe 6 to 12 months after the Venom movie that's coming out soon. You get this one for like $750, $700 maybe. That would be kind of my strategy on it, but tough one not to just get out there and want right now. I remember this one being $400, and with that low 9.8 percentage there, the low 9.8 ratio, it's nice and rare in the 9.8. That never made sense to me. I was like really recommending this one around 400. I bought one of mine for about 400. Another one, it was like 530 or something like that. Like I got into a bit of a bidding war and overpaid for that one at the time, but it's kind of all worked out. Yeah, and this one's a classic. It's trending in the right direction price-wise. And one to recommend. Maybe be a little bit patient now, though, and hopefully, you know, closer to kind of 800, I would say, in the 9.8. For an Amazing Spider-Man 252, CGC 9.8 white pages. Okay, next one is one I got to here. I'll show you really quick. An Uncanny X-Men number 141. And I shared this one on my Instagram, this exact one on my Instagram. And I just mentioned, you know, if they ever get into a sort of into the X-Men verse kind of thing, because clearly they've done it with Spider-Man and everything like that, maybe some of the alternate future X-Men, where their first appearances are in this book, maybe they become a little bit more popular. And that's complete speculation, but, you know, just something to mention that I did mention on my Instagram post. But besides that, this is just a vintage classic X-Men book. Days of Future Past Part 1. Yeah, Uncanny X-Men 141. If you're an X-Men fan, is just a classic one to collect. Definitely an investment grade 1980s book. There's 623 CGC 9.8s in the blue label, 14.2% the CGC 9.8 ratio. So this is a 1981 book, 14.2%, not too bad, but being that it's early 80s, you'd like to maybe see it, you know, maybe flirting with the single digits, but still a decent one, you know, still a decent investment grade 9.8 ratio. Interesting with this book here, Go Collect's got the fair market value at $525. Yet on eBay, the last two that had sold, one was for $605 and another one was $649.99. Yeah, in a direct version too. So like mine is the newsstand, but in a direct version for $649.99. I think that's going to be a bit of an overpay in this environment, although, you know, the market seems to be adjusting a little bit. There's, you know, a lot of these books that are $1,000. If you look at a lot of the books that are $1,000, this one around, you know, $650, even though I said that's just an overpay, that kind of begins to make a little bit more sense. But yeah, I think this one just being such a classic X-Men book, and then maybe that wild card out of nowhere, if you get super lucky, they start doing like X-Men verse type stories, and you get some of these alternate X-Men's becoming more popular characters. But you know, if that doesn't happen, you just get a great book. Days of Future Past is so classic for so many X-Men fans and so collected. Yeah, and definitely just for nostalgia purposes is why I have a 141 and 142 in the CGC 9.8. These covers just stood out to me when I was young, so I definitely wanted to grab them. But yeah, both of them pretty much fit on an investment grade 1980s list that you can buy and hold forever. Okay, next one. It's an Incredible Hulk number 340. Yeah, Incredible Hulk 340. I have some more Mcfarland books on the honorable mentions. Was kind of not too sure what Mcfarland 9.8 to put on the list here, but Incredible Hulk 340. It's a really popular one, so it's kind of somewhat easy to find, but definitely an investment grade CGC 9.8. So there's 733 9.8s out there in the blue label, 13.6% the CGC 9.8 ratio. So of all graded copies, 13.6% of them are CGC 9.8s. For a late 80s book, this one a 1988 book, that's really nice and rare. That's actually even lower, if you notice, than Uncanny X-Men 141. Yet that book's from 1981. So this one, 1988, a newer book. You'd think it wouldn't be as rare. It's more rare in the 9.8. So that's really interesting. This one always kind of stuck out to me for that reason. Also, this is the second time Hulk and Wolverine ever fight. Me being a big Mcfarland fan, loving this cover. I think it's a really innovative kind of cover with sort of the reflection of Hulk in Wolverine's claws. If we have a look at some of the prices for Incredible Hulk 340 in the CGC 9.8, there was an auction that had just ended on eBay for a pretty great looking one in a new case for $755, and another completed listing for $850. So people are getting up there and paying those, you know, pretty extreme, pretty high prices, I think, for this one. This is one, I love this one. I have 4 of them in the CGC 9.8, and I bought them right around $400, all of them. So to see this one kind of for $750, $850 now, it's come a long way, but with that 9.8 rarity, it's a pretty nice rare one. You know, Hulk vs. Wolverine's always going to be special. This is a real kind of affordable alternative, a sort of affordable investment grade alternative to Hulk 181. Yeah, I think a Hulk 340 in the CGC 9.8 is a great alternative to that. So a lot of, you know, different angles to come at for this one to recommend it. But yeah, definitely on a, you know, for late 80s book, it's really rare. Yeah, so it's one to focus on in the 1980s. Incredible Hulk 340 in the CGC 9.8. Next one is definitely one to focus on. Yeah, we'll talk about here. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. And I'll focus on the third print right now, because, you know, in the CGC 9.8, the third printing, I think, it's a fantastic collector item. The third print still kind of looks like the first 2 prints. and it's still somewhat attainable in the CGC 9.8. The first and second print, amazing too. I think in the first print there's 20-something 9.8s, and they're $70,000. So we'll talk about the prices for the third print, because they're still somewhat attainable, yet a really great investment grade book, I think. 53 CGC 9.8s in the third print for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. 6.9% the 9.8 ratio. Yeah, so of all graded copies, only 6.9% of them are CGC 9.8s. The lower the better for these 9.8 ratios. Once you get into the single digits in the 80s, these are special books and they get expensive. But that just goes to show that it's a better a more rare investment grade 9.8. Go Collect has this book, fair market value at $1,900. Interesting, there's one on eBay right now. I think it was like $4,500 or something like that. So Go Collect with that $1,900 fair value about 6 to 8 months ago. One of these popped up, 9.8 white pages, new case, looking really good, third print. It was $1,300, I believe. And, I watched it, thought about it, and it sold. Yeah, and then, 6 to 8 months later now at $1,900, some of them are selling for. So this one's trending in the right direction. If you're a Ninja Turtles fan, this one's still attainable. A lot of great things going for it. Yeah, definitely an investment grade 80s book to consider. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, the third print in the 9.8. Next one here. One I don't think I talk about enough probably, but it's Star Wars #42. And I think just since the season 2 Mandalorian whispers have been coming out, it's just been so expensive compared to what I'm used to it. So maybe that's why I haven't talked about it enough, because it's just hard to recommend it right now. I would just be like, oh yeah, it's really hot, really expensive, which is kind of what I'll say now. 287 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. So not a lot of them out there. I think that has a lot to do with kind of the price spike right now. 12.4%, the 9.8 ratio. So of all graded copies, 12.4% of them are 9.8s. This is a 1980s book, so, maybe that could be a little bit lower, possibly, but still a sort of, a teens, or in this case, below teens, almost a single-digit 9.8 ratio. Still, certainly investment worthy. But when you look at some of the completed listings for this one, because, I'll just, mine, I purchased... let's call it 2 years ago now, maybe even longer ago. One of the first 9.8s I kind of grabbed was $375. Yeah, I think it was about 500 Canadian, I remember it. So a little bit under 400, seeing some completed listings now. $1,269 one went for in an auction. Saw one sell, and I think this is a bit of an overpay. $1,499 for this one in the 9.8. That's pretty hard to believe. Go Collect has a fair value, $1,200. So, I think, even right now with the Mandalorian kind of imminent, and there's advertisements and stuff for it, I find. So, right now, I don't think I would recommend to get out there and pay $1,200 or over for a Star Wars 42. 6 to 12 months after the season 2 Mandalorian comes out, I think you grab this one, hopefully under $1,000 in the 9.8 would be a much better strategy. Yeah, I got a feeling this one will probably lull. Just feels and seems so hot. Great key though, yeah, and I think more people are kind of focusing on it because it's the first full appearance of Yoda, pretty much. Whereas initially this was the first Boba Fett, the bounty hunter issue, and that was kind of the original reason why I like a lot of Star Wars fans and why I bought it, basically. But so, just, really hot issue right now that I think you want to be patient on, but still belongs on a list. Yeah, it's still one to hunt and buy on a pullback, I guess. Okay, next one here is an Amazing Spider-Man 300. Yeah, we just did a video about this one. Just mentioning some of the prices that have come along, because, it's really doing quite well. And, I think if there was one 1980s CGC 9.8 comic book to buy sort of from an investment perspective, my recommendation would be Amazing Spider-Man #300 in the CGC 9.8. And why it's so special in the 9.8, we'll have a look on the census here. There's 1,043 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. So for a really popular character, that's actually not that much. This being the origin and first full appearance of Venom. But of all graded copies, only 5.7% of them are CGC 9.8s. And for a late 80s book, this is just unheard of pretty much. And I say unheard of, the Amazing Spider-Man 301 is another one that has a very low single-digit 9.8 ratio, but then you don't really get the first appearance of Venom in that. So in a sort of key issue, this is just era leading in the CGC 9.8. Yet it's still an attainable book. So yeah, a lot of reasons why I think Amazing Spider-Man number 300 is pretty much the best 1980s CGC 9.8 to invest in. So unfortunately right now with that Venom 2 movie coming, the prices are just getting a little bit ridiculous, I think. One had sold on eBay, I'll just give you the top, 5,200 was I think pretty much the highest I've seen so far. There was one on eBay as well in an auction in an off-white to white pages, 9.8 off-white to white, ended at $3,951. So, you know, given that price, and if you think about a white page one, you know, I think a fair value might be 4,100, 4,200 for a white page one right now. So, you know, tough for me on this one. Love this book, my favorite 1980s 9.8. But do I say, yeah, get out there right now and buy it? Maybe not. Yeah, you know, maybe you might get a little bit of a lull before the Venom 2 movie comes out in the next few months here. But if you don't, this could be one to wait 6 to 12 months after the Venom 2 movie. And I could sort of see maybe some white pagers going for 3,951, what that auction went for, maybe even a little bit less than that when this one cools down a bit. Yeah, I could even see this cooling down to like, yeah, maybe, you know, under 4,000, let's say 3,500 to 4,000. Right now, yeah, again, a great book, but wouldn't really recommend to get in there and pay like around $5,000 for one. Well, I think you want to be patient, see how the market goes. And it kind of makes sense because there's a lot of promo right now with Venom 2 kind of coming out early to mid next year, I think it is. But it's class-leading rarity. It's my favorite 1980s book to invest in. But maybe the timing just not quite right on it right now. But definitely one to have on a short list. Okay, last one here before we get into honorable mentions. It's a Batman The Dark Knight Returns #1. Yeah, you get the first appearance of Carrie Kelly, the girl Robin in Batman The Dark Knight Returns #1. Frank Miller's story, Klaus Janson helping there as well in the art. And such a classic book. This is from so many different perspectives, I think. Like this book, it's almost thought of as like the first Copper Age book ever, because Frank Miller used so many like innovative like drawing techniques and page layout techniques and just dialogue techniques like for the story that a lot of people just really think of this book as like the first modern comic book, like because he influenced, like even Todd McFarlane's on the record, like, you know, Batman The Dark Knight Returns just completely changed how I thought about like writing a comic book and how the page layout should be and things like some of the things you can do. So from that perspective, it's huge. Just like, and that's a sort of overall comic book market perspective. But from a Batman perspective, Frank Miller, yeah, this is thought of as almost like the first modern appearance of the new Batman almost, or like a different interpretation of a modern Batman. Yeah, because basically Batman in this one, you know, he's a complete badass. He's older. He just comes back and, you know, he doesn't care about people's feelings and he's just a huge badass. So a little bit different of Batman, who I think the Batman before was more, you know, aware of people's feelings maybe. But yeah, from so many different perspectives, especially even on the census for Batman The Dark Knight Returns #1, looking pretty good. 539 CGC 9.8s in the blue label out there. So a 1 of 539 for a classic Batman book like this is pretty great. 17.3% the 9.8 ratio. Doesn't seem that low or rare if you look at kind of some Spider-Man books and things like that, but for a DC Batman book, that's actually a nice rarity in the CGC 9.8 for this era. So pretty rare one, a 1 of 539 collector item. Yeah, we'll talk prices. The Batman The Dark Knight, it's like one of the top 10 graphic novels of all time too. So, you know, even outside of the comic book arena, like it gets accolades too. So yeah, a lot of reasons why it's such a great investment grade 1980s book. Prices, anywhere from like $750 to $850 in the blue label. In the CGC 9.8, yeah, I think if you can get one looking really good in a new case for $750, I think that's an absolute buy. what was it? I was having a look at some of the Signature Series ones online as well, signed by Frank Miller. Some of them looking really good. I think there's 1 or 2 up, like for like $1,500 or best offer, and that's pretty tempting. One looks really good, and I was kind of tempted to maybe just throw in like a 1,050 offer on that one and see what they said, kind of thing. But yeah, this is such a classic Batman book, and I definitely knew I had to have one, and they tempt me before, and I've kind of been on record as saying I kind of want another one in the CGC 9.8. Yeah, such a classic Batman book of the 1980s. Okay, that's the short list of 7. Let's get into some honorable mentions though here. Yeah, first one here, it's a Saga of the Swamp Thing, number 37. First full appearance of John Constantine. Yeah, this one, it stands out. It's, John Constantine, he's kind of like probably the most popular sort of modern horror hero, or anti-hero if you want to call him that. He's like a sorcerer kind of thing. So, gives you something different than sort of the heroes and villains, but still a very investment-worthy CGC 9.8. I think this cover just has classic cover potential, like hardcore, like over time. More people are just going to want this just for the cover, basically. But also, first full appearance of John Constantine. Definitely one to consider. And there are, I think, over $1,000 in the CGC 9.8 now. Yeah, I think one auction went for like $1,300 here just in the last few weeks. Next one here, almost had this one on the list. It's Transformers number 1 in the CGC 9.8. It's so collectible. Big cult of fans with Transformers out there that really collect this book. Recent records in this one too, in the CGC 9.8. We talked about that on our pricing video. A couple of them in the CGC 9.8 going for over $1,000. It is so collectible. So many people are nostalgic, grew up watching the Transformers. This is kind of the book to want in the first print. Maybe if you're super patient, you get it under $1,000. I still think that's a really good buy. But this, could have easily had been on the main list here. Next one in this sort of same vein, a G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero number 1 in the CGC 9.8. So this one's not as rare as Transformers number 1, but just as cool of a collector item, to be honest. There's similar amounts in the 9.8. This one's heating up as well. I think one had went around the $800 level, whereas I'd purchased mine not even over a year ago, and it was $375 or $380 or something like that. So this one's kind of come a long way too, but big cult of fans for G.I. Joe and Transformers. So they are 1980s CGC 9.8s to recommend, absolutely. Okay, a couple Batmans here that are great alternatives to Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Could have had these on the list. Batman number 357, the first appearance of Killer Croc and Jason Todd. Big first appearances of a villain and the second Robin. Pretty underrated, this one, I think, too. I think if, this one, given that so many books are around $1,000 now, if you can get this one around $600 or something like that, which I think there are some completed listings kind of going around that price range. Such a great one. Yeah, a classic book. Not a lot of them out there. Rare in the 9.8. Yeah, a great one from every angle, pretty much. Next one, Batman 423. Classic Mcfarland Batman cover. Yeah, this one you want to get in the first print too. All the other prints look the same, so a lot of times you just want to get the first print in that case. But there's just over 100 of these in the 9.8 in the blue label, so not a lot of them out there. Mcfarland didn't do a lot of Batman. This is the coolest cover, the most well collected. An auction, kind of a good range of prices on this one, actually, because a couple weeks ago there were some auctions that went for like $950 and then $1,000, and then just in the past couple days here, one had ended at $770. So yeah, a lot of times you want to be careful on these initial spikes up to record prices on some of these comic books over $1,000. Sometimes an auction might pop up and, it'll sell for a $770 instead of around $1,000. And that's what happened with Batman 423. So yeah, if you want this one, I think anywhere under $800, it's a great book. If you're a Mcfarland fan, less than 100 out there, great one in the 9.8 to consider. Last Batman one here, Batman 428, The Death of Jason Todd. This one, from sort of my research out of the main keys that I know about and everything in the 9.8, this is the most rare Batman 9.8 of the 1980s, pretty much. It's more rare than all the ones we've talked about, even the older ones, Batman 357. It's a little bit more rare than that in the 9.8. If you look at the 9.8 ratio, and I think it's around 11%, which is really, really low for a 1980s Batman book. This one's a big key, Death of Robin, not a lot of in the 9.8. So yeah, just one to consider. And because it's pretty much leading in the 9.8 rarity, it's certainly one to an investment grade one in the 80s to consider. Another cool DC one, Tales of the Teen Titans number 44. This is when Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing. And it's the origin of Deathstroke the Terminator, I think, too. Cool cover, though. Really collectible, a little bit more affordable. This one, I think, is still, an investment grade 1980s book, but wanted to have a couple affordable ones for sure. I think this one, though, sort of heated up with some of the Teen Titans shows and stuff like that. I don't know if it's Dick Grayson or just Robin is a big... maybe it's Nightwing, is a character in some of those shows. But this one, I think, did sort of heat up to around 300, a little bit over 300. Hopefully you can still get it under 300 in the CGC 9.8, but definitely one to consider. Next one is a certain investment grade 9.8 in this era of X-Men comics. It's Uncanny X-Men 129. Yeah, and the 9.8, this one has a single-digit 9.8 ratio. So yeah, I think it's kind of 8 or 9% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8. First appearance of Kitty Pryde. It's I think it's first appearance of Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw. I'm pretty sure. Classic cover of the era, though, right in the midst of the sort of John Byrne, Terry Austin era of X-Men. Big first appearances, rare in the 9.8. I think this one, it's getting up to like $1,500. So anywhere under $1,500, if you really want this one in the 9.8, I think it's a really rare 9.8, and it's kind of one-to-one. One I've been tempted on before, to be honest. Okay, next one, another affordable one. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures, number 1 in the CGC 9.8. Yeah, this one, it's a first appearance of Krang, Bebop, and Rocksteady. So a couple of kind of first appearance of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle villains. But I think the underappreciated thing about this one is it's, to my knowledge, the first time you get the turtles in the 4 colored bandanas. And that's how I think I knew the Ninja Turtles as, and growing up, and I thought they always had the 4 colors. So I think that's a little bit underappreciated with this one. And in the 9.8, in the blue label 9.8, sort of normal priced version, they're less than $300 usually in an auction. And I think, right around sort of a $250 to $275 price for a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures number 1 in the 9.8 white pages is a really cool collector item. Okay, another G.I. Joe one. This one even more of an investment grade if you're investment grade 9.8 if you're a huge G.I. Joe fan. G.I. Joe number 21. G.I. Joe, a real American hero, number 21. First appearance of Storm Shadow, this silent issue. Really rare in the first print 9.8. Hard to find. I think this one, if you can get under $1,500, like it's that expensive now. It's more expensive than G.I. Joe number 1. Yeah, really tough one to find. But if you're the biggest G.I. Joe fan, that's the one to get pretty much. And I think over time it'll trend up. It's just really rare. And the classic silent issue, I think, will always be collected. So, okay, last one on the list here of honorable mentions in the whole list. I want to talk about an Amazing Spider-Man 238. Yeah, first appearance of Hobgoblin. Bit of an interesting time for this book. I did have it on my main list too, but I scratched it off. I think, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1. So I had to scratch this one off. But first appearance of Hobgoblin in the 9.8. This one's pretty rare because it initially kind of came with that tattoo insert. So it's just really hard to find in the high grade because kids were basically ripping out the tattoos when they first got them, kind of thing. So another thing with this one, someone on the team this morning actually let me know that there's maybe a couple of rumors of Hobgoblin being in the next Spider-Man movie. And there was a completed listing for this book for $1,675 in the CGC 9.8. Just a direct version in the CGC 9.8 white pages. Looking pretty good in a new case, but that is quite expensive. This one's a great one. This is one to want, one to recommend. I remember, back when I was recommending this one, I was like, anywhere, if you can get under 1,000, buy it. Maybe if you want it right now and it's looking great, 1,100, 1,200. But over 1,500 right now, maybe not. I think you just want to wait and see what happens with these rumors. Likely nothing will happen, and then it lulls, and you can get it under 1,500 in the CGC 9.8. But Amazing Spider-Man 238, it's a single-digit 9.8 ratio, super rare in the 9.8. So yeah, definitely one to have on a 1980s list. Okay, so 18 CGC 9.8s there from the 1980s. Yeah, the 1980s, it's such a great era. I really, like, from an investment perspective and for me a nostalgia perspective, but it really is the last era that you can buy these 9.8s for like decent prices, you know, like, you know, once again to the 70s, everything's so expensive, the 9.8s are so rare. So I think this is a bit of a special era, and in my experience in the last 3 years of collecting, like, this is my pretty much era. I got a lot of keys out of this era. My experience is that the values are ticking up a little bit, so might not be as affordable for much longer, possibly, some of these classic keys. And I think, you know, you could probably say that for some of them already now, but you know, that being said, still want to be strategic, still want to think of the ones that are maybe not as hot right now that you can get in there and buy, possibly. But yeah, hopefully you got some ideas here on a full investment grade list of 1980s CGC 9.8 comic books. If you haven't already, I would invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8. Yeah, I'd love to have you on our comic book collecting and comic book investing team. Hit the bell for all the latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter as well. All the links in the description below for that. But yeah, a lot of ideas here. This is my favorite era, so you know, just can't recommend these books enough. If you're a CGC 9.8 hunter, you probably want to get in there, you know, as soon as you can, and you know, before a lot of these prices end up getting to be more. Because as I said, yeah, the appeal of the 80s for me was that it's the last bastion where you can buy affordable 9.8 comic books, but some of the big keys aren't so affordable anymore, so unfortunately. But okay, we'll wrap it up there though. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate all the support. Message me on Instagram if you did have any questions about whatever it might be. But thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.